Hello, I'm Don Mitchell. Welcome to Business Basics. Today we're talking about more ways to reduce investments and still deliver great results for everyone who needs them. In this case, we'll be looking at lesson 38, which is entitled Eliminate Receivables and Slash Inventories. Let me begin as always by quoting from the Bible, in this case 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 14 through 16 in the New King James Version. Now for the third time I am ready to come to you, and I will not be burdensome to you, for I do not seek yours, but you. For the children ought not to lap for the parents, but the parents for the children. And I will very gladly spend and be spent for your souls. Though the more abundantly I love you, the less I am loved. But be that as it may, I did not burden you. In the preceding lesson, I described a large number of advantages gained by providing offerings almost instantly. Now I'd like to describe more general purpose ways to gain some of the same advantages. We begin by looking at useful ways to eliminate receivables. By that I mean accounts receivable and to slash inventories. We'll look first at receivables. Let me quote here from the book of Proverbs, chapter 1, verse 3. To receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. What is an account receivable? It's an invoice you've issued to a customer for a payment that's currently due. In essence, you've extended credit to your customer until the customer pays. How much credit you grant is determined by the likelihood you will be paid on time, the creditworthiness of the customer, how much influence you have with the customer, and payment practices in your industry. Accounts receivable are simply the sum of all the outstanding invoices that are due to your organization because they haven't yet been paid. Why do customers want credit? You would have to ask each customer to know for sure, but common reasons include the following. First, they want to examine the offering to be sure it doesn't have flaws before paying, in order to make it easier to persuade you to either take a defective offering back or to correct any defects. Second, it's impractical for them to process and pay invoices very fast. The credit period allows them time to do the necessary steps. Third, they already owe a lot of money and don't want to pay interest costs to borrow more in order to pay you more rapidly. Fourth, their management bonuses are based in part on having more cash on hand. As a result, the managers earn bigger bonuses when you're paid more slowly. Fifth, the company is desperately in need of cash in some cases to keep operating and cannot borrow anymore at a reasonable cost. This reason occurs more often during deep and prolonged recessions. And finally, they've always gotten credit at no cost and see no reason to lose the benefit. Now let's look at the other side of the credit issue. Why might you want to extend credit? First, you make a lot of mistakes in providing your offerings and don't want to annoy your customers even more by expecting them to pay before you correct matters. Second, they aren't going to pay in the usual time because their payables processing is so inefficient. And you don't want to annoy them by sending reminder notices and calling them when you know they lack the systems to pay. They negotiated for lots of credit as part of the deal through which you got the order. If you ask them to pay sooner, you just increase the likelihood that they will switch suppliers. You have lots of extra cash and can afford to use extended credit as a way to attract business, something your competitors cannot match. Your bonus isn't affected by the size of accounts receivable, and it is affected by whether or not you lose an account, as is the case with sales or profit-based bonuses. Now let's examine why a customer might not want to have credit. First, you offer a lower price to those who pay in advance or on receipt of the offering. Second, the person you work with in the customer company knows that internal budget cuts might be coming and wants to spend the existing budget with you before that happens. Third, the cost of your offerings doesn't negatively affect the company's investment and equity returns because the expenses are charged only to the balance sheet rather than the profit and loss statement, which is the case for many services associated with capital transactions, such as investment banking fees for making an acquisition or a divestiture. Paying you more promptly gains the customer some desired advantage of working with you and your organization, such as having more access to your best people. Finally, let's look at why you might not want to extend credit. First, if you can get paid sooner without making a price concession or annoying the customer, you can earn a return on that capital or avoid paying interest on that amount of money if you happen to be a borrower. Second, if there's any risk the customer will never pay you, you avoid losing money due to such a default. Third, if your organization is committed to working closely with customers, Not extending credit may increase your focus on providing the best possible offerings and services so you don't annoy anyone who has or will be willing to pay you very promptly. Fourth, if you have limited funds, the cash you have can be redirected into a more valuable use for all of your customers and stakeholders. And finally, if you don't have to carry very many accounts receivable, you'll be able to serve more customers from the capital base that you have now. Now that you've seen a number of different perspectives on the subject, I'm sure it's begun to occur to you that substantial accounts receivable exist mostly for good reasons. It can, however, be offset by providing even more desirable reasons for customers not to receive credit. When you offer and deliver on your promises concerning what customers care the most about, you usually don't have to offer much, if any, credit. And customers feel well treated by obtaining something that's more valuable to them than credit. Here's how my consulting firm approached this issue back in the old century. Beginning a few years after we started, we provided the option to make a prepayment of 1/3 of the estimated professional fees for the total project. We would keep the prepayment until the other 2/3 of the project had been paid, and then credit our customers' account for the prepayment. When someone took this option, we operated with advanced payment funds throughout any project. We justified this option to customers by lowering prices that reflected the prevailing interest rates. People were always happy to take that option. In the process, most customers saved about 2 to 5% of the project's cost. Later, we began asking for 100% prepayment of professional fees on the same basis, and people were happy as long as we guaranteed our work. Each company will have to examine its own circumstances and those of customers to see how it might provide customer benefits that are more valuable than credit. Obviously, it will be easiest to establish such an approach when starting a new customer relationship or launching a new company. If your alternatives to offering credit are more attractive to each customer, you'll find that they will start shifting towards your preferred credit practices once they understand the benefits. I'm sure you have your own ideas about how to eliminate accounts receivable in ways that are desirable for all stakeholders. Please add such opportunities to your thinking as well. So what's the key point about eliminating receivables? By reconfiguring your relationship with customers to provide more value in different ways, you can rapidly reduce your company's need to offer credit by 96% compared to what you do now in ways that will help you make your organization and stakeholders more successful, profitable, and cash rich. So here are your assignments in this regard. First, identify the 5 most valuable ways you could provide benefits to customers that they would prefer over receiving credit from your organization. Second, consider how such changes would affect your other stakeholders. And then third, investigate how your business model could be shifted to be even more effective by providing even more valuable benefits and credit to customers that are helpful for other stakeholders. Now I'd like to talk about slashing yours and your stakeholders' inventories. In this case, I'd like to quote from the book of Hosea, chapter 11, verses 1 through 7. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. As they called them, so they went from them. They sacrificed to the Baals and burned incense to carved images. I taught Ephraim to walk, taking them by their arms, but they did not know that I healed them. I drew them with gentle cords, with bands of love, but I was to them as those who take the yoke from their neck. I stooped and fed them. He shall not return to the land of Egypt, but the Assyrian shall be his king, because they refused to repent. And the sword shall slash in his cities, devour his districts, and consume them. Because of their own counsels, my people are bent on backsliding from me. Though they call on the Most High, none at all exalt him. Well, that's a sobering comment. So let's now address the inventory more directly. What is inventory? It's an accounting term that applies in a big way to all manufacturing organizations, an important way to retailers and wholesalers, and to some extent to other service organizations in terms of essential equipment that frequently wears out, such as replacement airline parts for an airline. So let's start with manufacturers. They usually have 4 kinds of inventories: raw materials, in-process goods, finished goods, and spare parts. A screw manufacturer might start by purchasing steel rods to make screws. Such rods would be raw material inventory. Without some of such inventory, the screw manufacturer couldn't start the production process. As soon as some cuts are made into the steel to reshape it into screws, the steel moves from raw material inventory to being in-process inventory. When the work is completed on the in-process inventory, the products are ready for use, The screws become finished goods inventory. Until someone buys and takes legal possession of the finished screws, they're part of the manufacturer's asset base as inventory. The screw making equipment will probably need to have some spare dies to cut the screw threads, and such dies and any replacement production parts will need to be in the spare parts inventory. After a purchaser takes possession of the finished goods on a legal basis, the manufacturer's finished inventory moves onto the balance sheet of the purchaser. Okay, for retailers and wholesalers, typically there's only one class of inventory, finished goods that they sell. Some of that inventory may be readily accessible to customers, while other inventory is in backup storage, such as in off-site warehouses. For other service organizations, typically there's only one class of inventory, spare parts on hand that are needed to sustain operations when an essential part wears out. Before looking at how inventories can be slashed, let's first list some of the reasons why there are inventories. We'll start with manufacturers. First, if you do any manufacturing for yourself, as opposed to hiring contract manufacturers, you need to have some raw materials in processed goods and spare parts. Second, if your customers do not immediately take ownership of all finished items before or when you complete them, you're going to have some finished inventory. Retailers and wholesalers usually need to have some stock on hand for people who immediately want the goods. For instance, when you go to the supermarket to buy food for dinner tonight, you don't want to wait for what you bought to be delivered tomorrow. You would instead buy some items whenever stores have the food in stock or purchase different food that is in stock. Other service organizations will have some spare parts that critical equipment can be kept in service. Otherwise, there might be a delay of 2 or 3 days waiting for a part, causing some operations to halt. Manufacturers have a similar need for spare parts, but that need usually accounts for just a small percentage of all their inventories. Your business model and the ways you manage your business also have large effects on your level of inventories. Let's look at a few manufacturing examples. First, if your raw materials supplier provide large price discounts for volume purchases, you may only purchase them every few months. In the meantime, the unused inventory simply sits at your premises until you put all of your last purchased raw materials into the manufacturing process. Second, if your equipment is highly automated, it may not make sense to set it up to make certain items until you need a minimum quantity of such finished items. In that case, you may accumulate orders until you can produce a minimum batch, which may be quite a bit larger than the amount you have orders for, creating some finished goods inventory until more orders come in. Third, if your customers have a seasonal use for your product, their consumption may exceed what you can produce during the busiest times of the year. In that case, you'll start making extra items before the busy period starts. Examples: a petroleum refiner making heating oil in the late summer. Next, if you have a complex production process that's unreliable, you may keep extra raw material in process inventories so you won't run out of materials to work on during times you experience manufacturing problems. Next, if your salespeople have trouble meeting their quotas until the end of the quarter and year, you may have to start building products before you have orders so that you can ship in time to get credit for a sale before the end of the accounting period. And finally, if your products need to age before they're ready to sell, such as fine wines and whiskey, you end up with lots of in-process inventory. For a retailer or wholesaler, you might operate so that you have no stock other than what is on your shelves. If customers want something else, they just have to wait. That approach may cause sales to be lost, but it does keep inventory levels down. A service organization might provide equipment maintenance for customers who require that spare parts be kept in stock that aren't billed until the parts are put in the customer's equipment. Well, what then are some of the classic techniques for slashing inventories? First would be to reduce the number of different offerings you provide. Each physical offering requires inventory, yet 20% of your offerings will probably provide 80% of your volume and almost all of your profit. Cut back to just provide the most profitable 20% of your offerings, and you can probably eliminate 80% of your inventory. If you very lightly stock the lowest volume of the remaining items, you can further reduce inventory, but be sure to keep plenty of stock for what's highly profitable in terms of return on investment and provides most of your total profits. Second, add inventory only when you receive an order, and then custom manufacture or custom ship the item. That's what Dell does with its desktop computers. They don't buy computer monitors until they have an order. Their monitors are in inventory at the supplier's warehouses. UPS draws from the supplier's warehouses and coordinates delivery to the customer of the total computer order, some parts of which come from Dell's factories and some parts from suppliers' warehouses. Third, have suppliers carry a great deal of finished inventory if you're a wholesaler or retailer, and direct them to supply you just when you need to provide the items. Gas stations that repair vehicles keep almost no parts. They simply expect wholesalers to deliver needed parts within an hour of calling for them. And finally, outsource as many activities as possible so any necessary inventories are efficiently held by your suppliers. This is a standard product in working with outsourced suppliers. In thinking about such techniques, it's clear that you should not focus solely on inventories in making these decisions. You want instead to have a business model that optimizes the overall opportunity to produce more sales, to cut costs and reduce investment for you and your stakeholders. Consequently, your thinking shouldn't stop at the limits of your organizational boundaries. You also need to consider how you can slice inventories for suppliers, partners, customers, customers, end users, and other stakeholders, including beneficiaries. Otherwise, you're just moving the inventories around rather than actually slicing them. If you don't look out for stakeholders' inventories, expect the cost of such investments will eventually come out of your profitability and cash flow in some indirect way. Good business model design should reduce the amount of inventory throughout the supply chain for supply and consumption. In many manufacturing businesses, it's not unusual for there to be 6 months of inventory to support consumption. A better goal would be to have a few days of inventory in the entire supply chain to support consumption. How low can you go? Here's where offering design can play a critical role. There are many different ways to serve the same need. Some methods of serving customers require much more working capital than others. Look hardest at the choices that don't require much working capital. For instance, design manufactured offerings to have fewer parts. When you do, you slice inventories as well as lower costs and reduce errors. What's the key point about slicing inventory? Redesign your company's offerings, breadth of product line and business models to help slice the amount of inventories needed by your organization and by your stakeholders. Contribute to reducing overall investment in the supply chain and consumption chains by 96% compared to what it is now in ways that will help make your organization and your stakeholders more successful and profitable and rich in cash reserves. Your assignments are three. First, identify the 5 most valuable ways you could reduce inventories that would provide the most benefits that your customers and suppliers want. Second, consider how such changes affect your other stakeholders. And third, investigate how your offerings, breadth of product line, and business models can be shifted over time to be even more effective by making it easier for your company and stakeholders to operate with very little inventory. So I hope this lesson has been a blessing to you. I thank you for the opportunity to share it with you. Until we speak again, may God bless you, your family, and all you do in the name of Jesus.